Now, thank you for your input. Now I will make an arbitrary decision as to what we're going to cover. But I wanted you to feel included.
Yeah.
And I hope I've succeeded in helping you feel that I've included you before I ignore everything you ask me for. No, we'll actually get to a lot of this, but we're going to do it in a specific sequence. So we have to have an outcome for everything. So I don't care if we're doing resistance removal. I don't care if we're doing body language, whatever. We got to know what we want. We got to set a context. We got to know what we want. Human beings are context-driven creatures. We learn best in context, which is one of the biggest challenges we had when we first started developing these systems, because we wanted them to be multi-contextual, context-independent. And the problem is that people can't, if they can't contextualize, they can't figure out if something's for them or not, right? And so you have a very universal system like CPI, and it was like, it's persuasion. Persuasion for what? Everything, huh? Right? So you have persuasion for business people, persuasion for social applications, persuasion for medical applications. It's the same system with minor tweaks with the content, but it's the same structure, and people get that much better, right? So, so let me just take a look at what we've got here. So, well, the easiest thing to do is going to start with face reading. So let's talk about that a little bit, realizing we have a whole lot more that we can do with this. Okay, this is going to be the most immediately useful diagram of, well, there's actually more, but this is the emotional map of the face. Now, for those of you who have spent any time in the behavioral sciences world for any length of time, you've heard of a man named Dr. Paul Ekman. You've heard me talk about him and his books, Telling Lies and
Motions Revealed.
Motions Revealed, thank you. And we talk about the emotional refractory period. Dr. Ekman was the person who discovered the concept of the phenomenon known as micro-expressions. Mm-hmm. Micro-expressions are momentary facial fluctuations that happen when a human being is experiencing emotion they're trying to hide. They only appear for a fraction of a second, but they're very, very specific as to the kinds of emotions that the person is expressing or trying to conceal. The problem is they don't tell you why they're having those emotions. So it only tells you, it's just a diagnostic of what they're feeling, but not why they're feeling it. It's very useful in deception detection as well, but that is not this. This would be the corollary. This, what you see here, would be the consequence of a lifetime of micro-expressions. Every emotion that you have, every emotional experience that you have, marks your face. Okay? So the Chinese say when you're born, it's the closest you'll ever be to your original face, the face you were before you took on a body. They say by the time you're in your 50s, you've got the face you deserve. Because it's your emotional lifestyle, your trauma history, how you hold on to or release or process emotions, the way you've maintained your internal health, that determines what your face looks like. And the face, just like everything else about human beings, is holographic in nature. That's why when you do face reading, and face reading, I should tell you right now, it has over 3,000 years of empirical research behind it. Chinese observational science. And what we know, and it's one of the very first branches of Chinese medicine, we can diagnose your entire set of internal organs from your face. I know how your lungs are doing, I know how your stomach is doing, your large intestine, your small intestine, your kidneys, your liver, your spleen, your pancreas. I can diagnose all of it from your face. Okay? Just like I can diagnose your organs, I can diagnose your emotions, because there's correspondences for each of the organ systems has a range of emotional experiences connected to it. Those emotional experiences also mark and manifest on the face. And they mark and manifest in specific regions on the face. And as Elizabeth will tell you, how many people have actually had Elizabeth read their face this week? Mm-hmm. Right? It's extremely accurate. So, when I teach this, and in your books there's a whole section on cold reading. Do you guys have read your manuals?
Not yet.
No. Oh, fucking... Of course not. Okay.
It's like
well, there's
200 pages.
I know. Yeah. Those are the bullet points.
I've been listening to you all weekend and not
all right.
reading.
So in your section on cold reading, that whole section on cold reading predates my understanding of face reading. And it's awesome, because with cold reading skills, you can walk up to somebody and they'll swear you're psychic. You can make inferences based on the way the clothing they're wearing, the way they're nodding or giving you unconscious movements that have a high degree of accuracy. And the reason we want to focus on cold reading and applications that are similar to that is because anytime you demonstrate internal knowledge of somebody that you couldn't possibly have, or they couldn't, because they know they didn't tell you, you gain more authority in their world. The more authority you gain in a person's world, the more compliant and suggestible they become. So at the end of the day, the more you can tell somebody about themselves, the more fascinated they're going to become, the more open to suggestion they are. When you add face reading, Chinese face reading into the mix, your readings are no longer cold. You now have an accurate personality and temperament profiling methodology. And if you understand the deeper aspects of it, you know exactly what year they had major traumas, what years they're going to have major traumas. You know their primary decision-making style. You know the order and sequence to present the information in the way that's most conducive to them doing what you want. You know if they're more true in their public life or more true in their private life. Okay? All of these things you can know from across the room. Yes?
Do you know if there's any AI applications now that utilize that technology?
There are certain big number companies out there that are using artificial intelligences to scan for facial patterns that imply certain personality traits. A big one in China recently discovered a three variable configuration on the face that indicates a high probability of criminal activity or tendency to criminal behavior. Another one recently, there's another one that was found that there's a high correlation with the markings on your forehead to heart disease. Another one is finding grandiose narcissists by the shape and the thickness of the eyebrow. So these are all studies independent of each other that are finding that the face is showing us a whole bunch of stuff we never even realized was possible. And yet part of us is actually, part of our unconscious mind is actually monitoring those areas, and that's where we get feelings about people as well. It's because those characteristics have a meaning to the neurology that's archetypal within us, and we respond to it. Okay? So when you start looking at people, and those of you who are going into the therapy track, this is also going to be extremely important. When you start to look at these markings, you can start to tell people about themselves, and they will become absolutely fascinated with you. They will become oriented on you, and many times you will trigger emotional releases in them, depending on your application. So, first thing we want to do when we look at the face is we want to divide the face longitudinally. Okay? The right side of the face is your public face. The left side of the face is your private face. When we look at people, most of us tend to be right-eye dominant. So we tend to look at people's right sides of their faces through our right eye. Okay? How many people have that app facing? How many people came to face reading? Was it only you that
No,
did
it was me.
you had it?
Yeah, but it's the one that's not glitchy is called Face Symmetry.
All right, if you can go to your, we'll take a break in a minute. Go to your cell phones and find the app Face Symmetry. It'll allow you to take a picture of yourself, and it'll actually superimpose both your left sides of your face together, and both of your right sides of your face together. And what you're going to see is two completely different individuals. Okay? What the Chinese discovered was that the right side of your face is the face you show the world.
This one?
It's
I don't know.
Facial symmetry.
Yeah,
Is it this one?
so I got the pink one.
Why don't we take a 10-minute break and I'll do that, and then I'll come back and go into some of this.
Yeah, that's what I said. Facial symmetry.
Yeah, facial.
I'm sure they all work, but Face
One's for
Symmetry
dudes
Maker.
and one's for girls, but it's got 2.3.
Face Symmetry Maker's one you have?
Yeah, the giant pink one.
One's for guys and one's for girls.
And
Yeah, it looks like that.
Is on Apple.
What? Oh, I don't
I
know.
don't think I have it on my here.
Oh, yeah,
No,
sorry,
Face
that's
Symmetry.
Apple.
Yeah,
Facial symmetry.
yeah. They
Let's do it.
Why is it dark in here?
Look at me.
Contrast.
Well, we close some of these off, so these like to take over, and I don't feel like weirded out.
That's why I opened up as much as we could to flood the place.
Why you did what?
That's why I had them all open to try and get light in here.
Oh, that's better.
Okay, and this is 2 left sides. And
Go ahead, go, take your faces. Let me see if I can find. Let me find my face reading notes. I just happen to have this on my my desktop. So.
look at that.
I am.
What's the
These
name
are
of
2
it on
very different
Android?
people.
Well, there are a bunch of them.
Which
I
side
have-
is this one?
I'm
that
downloading
is
right
the
now
left side,
Face
that's
Symmetry
the right
Pro,
The blue one?
even though it has not very
Wow.
good
No, it keeps dropping out over tonight.
reviews.
So you are.
It doesn't need to be great. It just needs to work.
That's why I went for that.
That's why I use facing.
Everything doesn't work.
So when we look at health on the face, that's what you get. Right. Now, I don't teach this way, although I could, because Chinese organize things by 5 elements, which are archetypes of things. And most of us don't have a background in Chinese medicine, so those archetypes are rather meaningless. So we're gonna use a very different facial profiling approach that I think is much more friendly to the Eastern mind or the Western mind. But if you wanted to understand how to look at somebody and gauge their overall health, this is how you could look at somebody. The areas from the cheek, the bridge of the nose here are lung related. Reproductive organs are at the philtrum. Intestines are around and on the lips, kidney and bladders and the chin. Jawbone, liver. Kidneys are in the ear, below the eyes. Spleen is in the space of the eyelids here. Spleen and pancreas. This is a place that you're going to see a lot of markings happening. Okay. Now each of those is going to have a range of emotions associated with it as well. So when I see a marking there, I'm going to know one of 2 things right away. They either got a physical health problem or an emotional health problem. There's no gray area. There's more gray area than that. It's either at the psycho-emotional level or the physical level.
David, how do you differentiate between a wrinkle and a mark? Because wrinkles are just, everybody has wrinkles.
Everybody has wrinkles, but they run different ways. So many times when you see an emotion line, it's going to be diagonal. If you go back to the emotional map, see how the vast majority of these things run in diagonals? Other lines you'll see are horizontal lines that cut directly across. These are usually trauma lines.
Can I take a picture of that?
You can. These are usually trauma lines. Trauma lines usually just cut. When you look at somebody's ear and you start to look at, you'll see like there's almost like little divots taken out of the ear. Those are trauma markers. And they manifest from the inside out, not the outside in. So he didn't get hit in the ear, and then all of a sudden something happened, and his face marked at that chronological correspondence in his life. Women's lifelines begin on the right side to about 7 or 8, then pick up on the opposite side to about 13. Then they start here, travel right down. So you got the 20s to 15 to 20 here, 30, 40, 50, 60. So when you see markings along these lines, you can guess if they're past that age, something happened. If they're not there yet, something's waiting for them.
Can you do that one more time?
Which part?
1 through.
Women always begin on the right.
Right.
So remember that. Women are always right, and what's left is men.
So it's page 1 through 13. So 1 through 13.
1 through 7, and then 8 through, I believe it's 13 or 14 here. And then it jumps right to the center of the head, and then it comes, and then it actually, one line comes this way, and then it kind of zigzags across. I don't even worry about that, although a lot of more hardcore face readers do. I just need to know that this is my 15 to my 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, and then 120 is around here. Okay? So that's what I pay attention to. So if I see a line that goes across here, I know it happened in their mid-20s. Right, and again, we can read all kinds of lines. Right now, we're not going to worry about that because we'll get lost in the sauce. Yes, Brian?
Sorry.
Microphone? Where's Sabo?
Oh,
Microphone.
Mike's at horse.
Sabo, won't be able to make it.
Okay.
If the trauma or whatever caused the line to form changes,
Mm-hmm.
can the line go away?
Yes. You're going to see faces. You're going to read faces today. And if you unpack the trauma markings, that face is going to change in minutes. Wrinkles will go away
That quickly?
that quickly. I didn't believe it. I called bullshit to the highest degree when Lillian first started telling me this. And then I went to face reading class. And then at the end of the last day of the training, she brings these people in off the street and they take before and after pictures. Same lighting, same wall, same facial expression, as close as you can get. For some reason, after a face reading, they can never stop smiling. And you would do the reading, and then you take the after picture, and after everybody went home, she'd put the pictures up on the screen. They're different faces. Eyebrows get higher, bushier, cheekbones flesh out, jawbones. It's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm actually doing an emotional intelligence training down in Vegas,
Mhm.
and it's 4 days like this, but they do a whole bunch of experiential things
Mhm.
where you release trauma
Mhm.
and stuff like that, and literally, it's so freaky. The people are totally different after 4 days,
Mhm.
and the lady even says, the facelifts are free. So it 100% when you get rid of that stuff,
Mhm.
you can't not see the difference in them.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if you come to face reading in Vegas, or you can sneak into face reading in December, you're going to get the full spectrum approach. But this is when I first started going through the entire face reading curriculum, this was one of the first things that was immediately useful. And you're going to find that this is the one that fascinates people most. So we just start with this. So if we look at the clock, and again, once you guys have downloaded your apps and stuff like that, we'll look at the other aspects of the face, how to bisect the face from right to left, 3 sections, 3 horizontal zones of the face. Those are all things we can come back to and circle back to. But this is the one we want to play with first. We want to prove this to ourselves, first and foremost. So starting from the clock face, 1 o'clock, a line tracing the outer corner. You got it in spades right here. See this big L's dent? Your Anya has it worse.
Yeah, she's the bad ones.
That means you're an innately skeptical. So you don't believe shit without proof.
You say I do or do not?
You don't.
I don't, you're right.
Don't believe shit without proof. Okay. Let me see. Let me turn sideways, Ross. See the lines here? There's his auditory intuition. TJ's got like 3 sets of gills right here. When you see lines, I kind of skip the order. When you see lines right here, this is a sign of what we call auditory intuition. This is somebody who's really, really good at hearing what's not being said. Hearing between the lines. They've got really good bullshit detectors. It's usually the result of a challenging childhood. Growing up in an environment where you had to really be careful what you said. You had to be able to read between the lines, gauge people's moods by how they were talking. Physiologically, when people have this, there's also a tendency towards dehydration. So you want to make sure you're well hydrated. Okay, but this is one of those markings that starts off as a result of some kind of traumatic lifestyle or environment growing up, and then becomes a very powerful tool later on. Okay, I've got them like they go all the way through my head. So, but it makes for a good therapist. Okay? So if you see those, lead with this. Oh, you're one of those people that you just gotta have proof for everything, don't you? And it's like, yeah, how'd you know? The proof is on your face.
Our conversation this morning.
The eye.
Ain't no proof.
The eye carries, they say the eyes are the windows of the soul, and the eyes of all the facial characteristics carries so much information. We spent an entire class practically on eyes, to the exclusion of we did the hemispheres, we did the 3 zones, we did the emotional map, then we got to the eyes, and we spent like a day and a half just on eyes, and all the different things you can read from the eyes. It's really, really powerful. Okay, so starting at the outer canthus, lines that start at the outer canthus or the corner of the eye and they travel upward. These are joy lines. Okay? So if somebody's been experiencing a lot of joy, you'll see even when they're not smiling, you'll see lines here. If the lines travel, you go to the other side of the face. This is just, and this is these are not they are not only on this side. Okay, so don't let the mat fool you. You can have joy lines here too. Right? Any of the lines on this side of the face you can have on this side of the face. When the lines travel up past the eyebrow, this is no longer joy, it's mania. So these are people who are up at 3 o'clock in the morning texting.
Joy condition response.
Right? So this is what the Chinese would consider pathological joy, which is analogous to extreme excitement. But when people have those mania lines, they're going to go, there's a high probability of being manic, bipolar, okay? And it's going to flip on and all those things come out, okay? They mark pretty significantly. When the line starts at the outer canthus and travels downward, a short way down, we have sadness. Ooh, and it marks pretty significantly. Some of you have some stuff to work on. When the line grows further down the cheek, we have sorrow, which is a greater degree, much more pervasive. Right? The CBT people would call it characterological. Right? If it goes even further, now we're into grief. Okay. Now you'll notice that sadness, sorrow, grief, and this line here from the inner canthus, lost loves, they all pass through what area? Cheek, which is related to what? Based on this, on the
Lungs.
the lungs. This is why when you're treating people with COPD, asthma, allergies, many times when you unpack it, sadness goes to the lungs. Okay? There's a correspondence there. When you start to unpack grief and sadness and trauma and bereavement, it's almost always going to be coughing or sobbing or that's a grief breath. Okay? And even if they're not actually crying, as they're processing it out, you'll hear that breathing pattern. Okay? So, lost loves does not necessarily pertain to romantic love. Lost love pertains to something that was such an important part of your life. An activity, person, an object. It was such an important part of your life that losing that part was like losing a piece of yourself. And that when we go through those experiences, the lines appear here, from the inner canthus and descend down. Okay? Yes, Heather?
Are you able to tell when it started?
No. Sometimes you can, depending on how deep and how much further back it is, you can tell if it's older grief or more recent. But you really can't tell what age it started at. When we go through Golden Path, we'll start to unpack those things, right? Because you can see when people are on their path, or they're doing activities that are fundamental to who they are as a human being, they're more in their bodies, and so the light in their eyes and underneath their skin will be much brighter. We call that having more Shen. Shen means spirit. And it's related to the heart. Okay, when we're doing activities that we don't enjoy, that are painful or uncomfortable in some way, the spirit wants to leave the body. So you'll always see. You ever notice people who've been through dissociative identity or extreme trauma? Their eyes are flat. Their affect is flat. They're not in their bodies. And the more you're out of your body, the faster the body breaks down. Because the spirit, our Shen, is the negative entropic faculty. In other words, it causes the body to become more organized. It causes the body to become healthier. It causes the body to evolve. And so we want as much of that in us, that non-local part of us. We want as much of that in us and residing in this physical vessel as we can, because it gets healthier and it lives longer. And that's why getting on your golden path from a metaphysical, transpersonal perspective is so important for your health. You will literally get younger. You will live longer. Things will flow better. And it doesn't matter when you get on it. In fact, the people who get on it later move through it faster. Like I told you, Lillian had a client. She was a stay-at-home mom, got married, had a child that had some, I guess she was autistic or something like that, and she became like the tiger mom advocate for autism, and spent like 20, 30 years making sure this child got taken care of. And by the time the child was out and on her own, she was doing great. Most of her life she thought was over. And then they asked her if she'd like to run for like a local city seat or something. And she'd always thought about wanting to study politics. She said, well, I'll give it. And she won. 6 years later, she's a senator. In her 40s and 50s. Right? She got late, she went through faster. So wherever you start is okay. You're going to catch up. Yeah.
Can you show the other one that showed the organs?
I recommend you get Lillian's book, Face Reading in Chinese Medicine by Lillian Bridges.
Did you have that? Did you get it?
Face Reading in Chinese Medicine by Lillian Bridges. Here's.
It's on the reading list.
It's on the reading list. It's also available as a download.
Just
Yeah,
because it's on that list doesn't mean I'm gonna read.
What's that?
I said just because it's on the list doesn't mean I'm gonna read all one. Yeah.
No,
But you
it
should.
means
What's
you
her
can
last
find
name?
it.
Bridges?
Bridges, Bridges.
Lillian.
She told me not to tell you. She told me I was her favorite face reader. This magic moment.
What were you saying about bringing the spirit in?
Bringing more of the spirit into the body. That means pursuing pleasure, things that make your heart sing, so to speak. Which sometimes means going against everything you were taught. It means going against the people around you who say you shouldn't want that. Ask anybody who's ever dated a guy with the right car, the right job, and was fucking miserable. Right? Or vice versa. There's things that are right and there are things that are right for you. And sometimes the hardest decision we have to make is doing what's right for us. But that's what it's about. And the thing to remember about Golden Path work is that no life experience you've had is wasted. I'm using things today that I learned in Vo-Tech school before I decided. I actually went to vocational technical school and then quit vocational technical school to go to get on a college track. And then I didn't go to college until I was 33 years old. And I'm still using stuff today I learned in Vo-Tech school. Nothing from your life is wasted on your golden path. Every life experience, every tragedy, every trauma, every triumph, every inconsequential skill that you picked up, it matters. So, golden path is something that's worth exploring and really understanding it. Whether you embrace the Taoist approach or not, you've all at some point asked yourself or asked somebody else or somebody's asked you, what am I here for? I know I'm here to do something important, but I'm not sure what that is. That's what golden path is. It's not a job. It's not a career. It's a lifestyle with a purpose. Okay? So keep that in mind. There may be a ton of jobs that fit your golden path. Just systematically figure out which ones are the best fit, right? I thought when I was a kid I was going to be an actor, and I'm really good. I mean, I went to Pennsylvania Governor's School for the Performing Arts. I did professional theater in Pennsylvania for a couple of years. Did a couple extra works. I was in a game trailer, and here I am. Look what I do.
You're an actor.
Right?
You're a
I didn't
performer.
see it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I never saw this coming. But when I saw people up on stage and making a difference, that got me going. But I never connected that with acting skills. Nothing's wasted, right? And how does seduction skills matter when it comes to acting or saying? Guess what? It's all influence. Nothing's wasted. So I'm just putting that out there. Whether you want to come to Golden Path in Dallas or not, you're all here because that's the internal impetus is driving you. That's why you have that coolness feeling. I don't care why. I don't care if it's useful or not. It's just cool, right? That's the point. Right. All right. So, is this useful or?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And this is again. Once you open this box, you can't go back. I'm just telling you right now. Once you take the red pill, no, Every morning you're going to look in the mirror and go, oh shit. I need more joy. Right?
Time to spend.
But the flip side of that is anytime you want, you become the most fascinating person in the room. You already had that with echo technique. You tell people you're a face reader, they line up. Right?
So David, you have no line, right, on your face? Like.
Oh, I have lots of
right
lines
now.
on my face.
What's that?
I have lots of lines on my
No, but
face.
but those sadness one, right? Does that mean you've not experienced any traumatic sadness in your life? Do I judge it by that?
It means either I was so dissociated I didn't mark. I processed all my sadness and the lines went away. Or I haven't had any sad experiences, which I can tell you is bullshit. But we mark, but not always as severely as some other people. Everybody's trauma or intensity of emotional experience is unique to them. Seth may have a pet hamster that died when he was 12, and he has this lost love line for 30 years. I may have had a pet hamster that died when I was 12, and I was glad because I hated the little fucker. Right? It's the same gerbil, right? Or I may think, oh, it's no big deal. I'll just get another one, right? We can't gauge other people's emotional experience. That's why, as a therapist, you're compassionate, but you don't go to extremes in showing, because some of your clients have a vested interest in trying to freak out the therapist. They want to prove that their stuff is so bad that it's going to overwhelm the person in the chair. So, and never compare people's traumas.
And can't we gray room on our own?
You can.
Yeah. So
That was one of the most frustrating things for me when I was getting my face reading training. It's all diagnostic. That means talking about your problems for 5 solid days and not doing anything to fix them.
Yeah.
And if you know me,
How long did you last?
I think I lasted a day and a half before I started grabbing people and started trying to fix them. They didn't know who I was, so like, get away from me, you freak! By the end of the week, they're like, can you fix my shit? Even Lillian actually asked me to help her a couple of times. Just because you know this shit doesn't mean you, just because you can read this stuff doesn't necessarily guarantee that you can fix it. Now, the cool thing about face reading, if Chinese medicine had a psychology branch, it would be face reading. I call it Chinese vibrational psychotherapy. Because when you start to unpack the markings on people's faces and they start to process it out and talk about it and reframe it, those markings go away. It's just slower than our approaches.
Do you use it when you're doing the
Yeah.
therapy work to go ahead and...
Oh, I look at people and I know shit they don't even know I know.
Right.
I know things about your genitalia you have no clue I would even know.
I'm sure if you want.
No, sorry. The scary part is, ladies and gentlemen, for the last 5 days, I've seen you all naked.
I can throw it back.
All right. So one of the things that Chinese face reading was used for was actually business applications, legal applications, and matchmaking, determining sexual and romantic compatibility. So there's a lot that goes into this. Right. The CIA wanted to hire Lillian to train their operatives, and I think also one of the Canadian intelligence agency also was trying to recruit her for it as well. She didn't know that she wanted to do it because she was afraid the system would be misused.
Oh, well.
Like that ever.
Imagine that.
Yeah.
Yeah, really.
Nothing.
See, Lillian's father was ex-CIA.
Oh, so she knew.
Yeah, yeah. And I told Lillian, I said, look, if they want this technology, they're going to get it. But if you're involved, at least you can somewhat control how it's applied or how it's taught, right? And so I don't know if she ever went forward. I'm pretty sure she did not. But I think based on what I've learned, and I'm still a baby at this, as much as I can riff, and I'm still a fucking baby at this, and I'm going to get better because I'm that way. But we don't need to be super experts to get really useful information really, really quickly. So let's go back to our emotions on the face. Oops, that's not the emotions I want to talk about. All right, so skepticism, joy, sadness, sorrow, grief, lost love. Notice they all bisect that lung area. So many times when you see someone with a lot of asthma, COPD or something along those lines, chances are they're repressing a lot of grief. Yes?
Those lines there, I can confirm that.
Talk to us, brother.
Yeah, I was just confirming what you said. I had an ex-girlfriend,
Uh-huh.
and she has asthma and stuff, and she has those lines prominent.
Yeah, yeah. You'll see it a lot. Now, it doesn't mean it's 100% on everybody, but you'll start to see generalities come up, and that's what we go with. When you're learning influence technologies, you have to use a very specific, what NLP calls meta program. To do influence technologies easiest and fastest and most consistent, you have to use the sameness with difference meta program, which means you have to look at everything that's the same and then sort for what's different. Because if you start with differences only, you can't discern patterns. You're having to reinvent the wheel every single time.
Practical example.
Okay. Horace, tell me about those things.
Candy.
Well, yeah, how do they relate to each other?
They don't.
They don't?
I mean, no.
Okay, so it's all difference, isn't it?
Right.
Right? Leah, tell me about these things.
Well, the markers relate to each other and the candies relate to each other.
So sameness. See?
Edible, not edible.
Right? Sameness, difference. So you have basically 4 combinations of priority that we give to sorting for information. You can sort for everything that's the same. You can sort for everything that's different. You can sort for everything that's same and then some difference, or everything that's different and then look for what's same. Each and every one of you falls into one of those categories. But some of you, because your categories, maybe you start with difference. You look at everything that's different first. If I start telling you this is the same as that, and you're going to say, no, it's not. You're going to start arguing because you're not organized to think that way. Most of the people in the scientific community sort that way. X is different from Y, Y is different from Z, Z is different from 1, from 2, from 3, which is great in a scientific environment. However, if we want to systematize and develop a process by which we can apply the broadest strokes the quickest, we have to look at what's the same amongst all human beings first, so we can get that out of the way, and then look at what's different. Does that make sense? We have to find the patterns, and then the distinctions from the outliers from the pattern. So that's my meta program. Yours may differ, but this is what I find makes learning this material easier. Okay? I'll take my markers, you can have the Kit Kats. Okay, so going down to
Questions in the back.
yes, sir. Pass the microphone, please.
One of the things that I'm wondering about is like with the asthma and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So if let's say you take a child that was born with asthma, is that past life that you need to deal with?
Could be generational trauma. There's a strong body of evidence that's accumulating now that trauma is passed down, trauma is inherited. The book you want to reference for that, besides epigenetics, work by Bruce Lipton, is It Didn't Start With You. And we handle generational trauma the same way we handle any trauma, regress to cause. Regress to cause. Right? In fact, we had Colby actually was doing Grey Room, and he wound up triggering a past life memory that I had to help him fix. Right? That shit can come up. About 1% of all my clients, when we're fixing shit, will spontaneously regress to a past life. And I've seen proof in my clinic of genetically passed on memories, and not even in the same bloodline. I've had donor recipients take on the memories and behavior patterns of the donor organs that I've had to go in and do parts therapy on or get some kind of resolution. Crazy shit, yeah.
Do you have to discover the origins in order to
No.
unpack it?
Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. Most of the time we can nuke just about anything by pointing to where we feel it. But every now and then there may be a more multiple set of memories. Or
What if you don't have memories before, like, 4 and younger, or 5?
There's
and
always a
younger?
memory, you just can't
Okay,
access it
Right.
consciously.
So,
By definition, if you have a feeling, you have everything you need. If you
Right.
don't have a feeling, you don't have a problem. Right? So if there's a body feeling, you have an entry point into that holographic container with all the data, and therefore you can change it. You don't need to consciously know what it is, although many times you will. Many times what happens is, and some of you may have had this experience where you have this bad feeling you want to get rid of, you have no fucking clue what it is, you start to spin, and all of a sudden you have this revelation that comes out of nowhere, right? It's hidden behind the emotion. Emotion obfuscates data. It distorts it, okay, like steam. And as you clear the steam, the data that was hidden behind the emotion becomes available, and the system can now reprocess the experience in a better way. Your system is amazingly resilient if you just get the blockages out of the way. It can fix itself. Okay. Charlton has a question. Is this useful?
Yeah.
Okay.
When you're dealing with sorting and talking about same and difference, can you relate that for someone who's like an optimist or a pessimist?
They're two different meta programs. Optimists are always looking at the positive side of things, which by definition is difference. Right? You have a choice at any given moment. You can look at all the positive things, or you can look at all the negative things. We're choosing to look at the positive, which is sorting for difference. It's contrast. But it's not the same meta program. When we talk about, and by the way, there's a section in your manuals on meta programs. And we can talk about them and we can play with them a little bit, but by and large, if you're using the echo technique, you're already in their meta programs. Right?
Can you change your meta programs?
Theoretically, yes. I have not seen it done well. But Bannon will say you can change a meta program. The difference between our regular programs like criterion values and meta programs is they're largely content and context free, which means the way you sort your change, or the way you sort or choose clothing, is the same way you'll choose a house.
I'm thinking, so, somebody who is always...
Give him the microphone, please.
I'm thinking of somebody who's always, like, say, negative. Always looking at the glass, well, the glass is half empty. Can you reprogram that into being half full?
I think you can. I think it takes training, though. And I think the further back you go, the easier that training is going to be.
So basically, you almost did a past life or go to preconception.
I have seen very few things that can't be changed given the right technique and the right amount of intensity and the right motivation. It's just not likely. Okay? Now, there are certain facial characteristics that will tell us if somebody's going to be more optimistic or not. And if we can somehow change that negativism to optimism, the face will change. For example, come up here, Elizabeth. I don't know. I haven't looked at your eyes yet, so.
You actually did in face reading, but I'd like to see if they changed.
Okay. So if you look at, I don't know if you can see this, but look straight ahead. So what you do is you put a line across the pupil, and if the outer edge of the eyelid is above the pupil, she has upturned eyes. These people tend to be more optimistic, more outgoing. If they're downturned eyes, so if you see that the outer canthus drops below, these people have downturned eyes. These people will be more negativistic. They tend to be more kind of the sad good Samaritans. It's like these people are kind of have a negative view of the world. The world is a tough place, and so they expect more shit. But they're also soft-hearted. They have a lot of compassion, and so they're often taken in by a sob story. You combine that with there's a little divot at the end of some people's noses. If you feel your nose, there's a little indentation in there. She doesn't have it. If you feel that little indentation, that's what we call a human angel marking. These are people who tend to have a very big heart, who like to help people, but they're always a little sad for a couple of reasons. First of all, there's a higher part of them that knows that they come from someplace better than this, and this ain't it, right?
Yeah.
And they see the suffering in people and they want to help. I call you a special kind of stupid, right? You're the people who want to go to Identity by Design to fix other people's shit, right? Instead of your own. There's also physiologically, when you have that marking, there's a tendency towards anemia. It's a little bit blood deficient, as we talk about in Chinese medicine. Okay, so you can look when you start to read people's faces, you can measure across. Keep the pupil has to be straight, so you have to come straight across the pupil. If the outer acanthus comes up, they have upturned eyes. If the outer acanthus dips down, they have downturned eyes. And the people who have the upturned eyes tend to be the optimists. They're the ones that the world is good. Everything, look at the bright side of things. People who are regular, they're just kind of average, run-of-the-mill. People who have that downturned eye tend to have a more negative view of the world. They know bad shit happens to people, and when people give them a bad enough story, they'll usually try to do something to help.
How about different colored eyes?
Different colored eyes, there's not a lot to look at in terms of behavior for different colors. I can look it up and see if there's anything interesting there, but we don't do a lot with color, except Shen color, which is a skill I haven't mastered yet. Yeah.
In reference to the colored eyes, what about if there are like freckles inside the eye?
Freckles are usually indications of the extra fire element, so these people tend to be a little bit more energetic, maybe a little bit more chaotic, creative. That's fire. Right? You can always tell a fire person when they get home from work, because there's a line of clothing from the front door to their bedroom, because they're taking them off and throwing them everywhere as they're getting home from work. Right? You can have a seat. Thank you, Elizabeth. Okay? You can give her applause. She showed her eyes to you. Right. So, moving down this line, so we have skepticism, joy, sadness, sorrow, grief, lost love. Now, when you see these lines on people, don't use the label. In other words, don't say, "Oh, you're sad." No, you compliment them on the trait. You say, "Look, you've got some beautiful markings on your face. This line indicates that maybe sometime in your life you went through some really sad times, or maybe a bunch of sad times, right?" Or, I make a joke. "Oh, this line tells me you don't believe shit without evidence." You got to be funny about it. Don't say you're a skeptic. People don't like the labels, so describe behaviors and how it manifests, and people will buy into it faster. And this would be true whether you're using handwriting analysis or cold reading. Right? We'll talk about cold reading statements or Barnum statements later. But right now, I've gone to face reading because now my face readings aren't cold. My reading people isn't cold anymore. Now it's actual, accurate assessments of who they are and the life they've led, which is, to me, even more powerful. Because now I know what to say and how to say it. Right? So, but you can mix and match, and you'll start to get insights about people very, very quickly. Humor lines. Humor lines are usually manifested by a little line down the center of the lower lip. Now, if they have a really big lower lip, this is a hedonistic trait. People who have very big lower lips are very pleasure-seeking. They like their physical pleasure. It's an aspect of the earth element. Okay. We went quite deeply into lips at the training. People were very paranoid after that.
It's very confronting.
So if you see that, you know they've got a pretty good sense of humor, or at least they can take a joke. If you see a really short philtrum, this isn't the map for this, but if you see a really short philtrum here, the space between the base of the nose and the upper lip, if it's really short, they can't take a joke. These people are very, very sensitive to criticism.
The space between the nose and the lip?
Yeah, if they have a very short philtrum. These people, they may not show it, but they do not handle perceived criticism well. All right, be very careful with that, yeah.
Going back to the eyes. A lot of
microphone, please.
Going back to the eyes. Going back to the eyes, I notice a lot of people have one eye is bigger and one is smaller.
Yep. And if it's on the right side, that they're more open to the world on their public side. If the right eye is bigger on the left, their heart is more open in their private life. So they're more willing and open to share, to let things in. The size of the eye indicates how open you are to receiving or giving information. A big eye, a round eye, indicates very large openness, a lot of imagination, a lot of willingness to take information in and share information. Okay? The smaller the eye, the more closed the eye, the more filters are in place, the more selective they are. Okay? So someone who may have a big eye but holds it very closed is evaluating everything you say. And they're not going to let things out. Okay? So when you see somebody who has a big eye on the right side, which is their public face, it shows you that they have more openness to the public on the superficial side of things than they do in their private life. If it's flipped, you can read the equation. If they're balanced, then they're balanced. But you can start to ascertain, are people who they say they are? Does the right side match the left side? And more often than not, they don't. They don't. And you can get a pretty accurate picture of how these people are when the doors are closed and the lights are off and nobody's looking. Right? That's why when I looked at Bill Cosby's face, I went, oh shit. Okay, don't believe me, go look. You'll see it.
Right when they look, like when you say right and left, right?
True right, which is their right side.
Their right side's probably.
But even Bill Cosby's face, if you look at younger pictures and older pictures, are very different.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. You look at pictures of me when I was in my 20s and 30s. I'm not the same guy. Most people can't look at those pictures and recognize me. I look that different. Okay? Half my family can't recognize me. Right? So, eyes, again, we could spend, like I said, 2.5 days easily just on eyes. So, and we will in Vegas. Actually, yeah, Vegas will be doing eyes and mouth. December we'll be doing ears, cheeks, and probably chins.
So when you're working with the eyes, is that like iridology or not?
No, iridology is a derivative of this. You can treat the entire body through the eye, just like you can treat the entire body through the ear in Chinese medicine. So and everything about the human body is fractal and holographic. So there's an acupuncture system called Image, where I can treat the entire body on the forearm, or on the leg, or on the ear, or on the tongue, or on the genitalia, or on the eyeball. I don't know who you're going to get to let you needle people in the eyeball, but that's how iridology is the diagnostic aspect of that, because different body locations in the eye that correspond to the organs will discolor or what have you. Same thing with the ear. I can look at your ear and where the white spots are, where the red spots are. I know where there's frozen energy, where there's inflammation, stagnation, and all those other things. And I can fix your body through your ear. We're all holographic fractal beings. We're light, in essence. Mostly empty space between. And the moment those refracting filters or lenses within us change, how we look changes. And emotions are one of those refractory phenomena. Okay? I envision the human nervous system like a big prism. NLP gives us the same analogy. Generalized experience comes in, it's refracted into 5 channels. We know there's visual, auditory, kinesthetic, olfactory, and gustatory. And then those 5 bands of energy are reconstructed and put back together to create this. But it's a highly refracted, distorted image. It's not true, it's just a representation. Just like your face isn't true. It's just a representation. And as what's inside changes, what's outside changes. Okay? One of the ones I want you to pay a lot of attention to, let's go to the center of the face, right here. You guys see this? This area right in between the eyes and right at the bridge of the nose. For those of you who do a lot of trauma work with domestic abuse or child abuse, a lot of times what you'll see are these lines that run from the side of the nose downward, outward, like so. These are, Lillian calls these disempowerment lines. And I don't like that word because I don't think it's quite accurate. Certainly there's an element of disempowerment to it, but the way that it was explained to me was at some point in this person's life, somebody violated their boundaries and they resisted, they pushed back. And the pushback from their their standing up for themselves was so strong that they started to do anything they could to appease the other person. So I call them appeasement lines. So they started capitulating to doing whatever the other person wanted because they didn't want to upset them because for whatever reason. And so when you see a lot of that kind of appeasing behavior, you're going to see lines, and I've seen people come in, look like somebody took a razor knife and just dug furrows into their freaking face. And many times you'll see this when people smile or whatever, you'll see them pop up. If you see them and the person's not smiling, you've got some serious appeasement stuff going on here. These are people who probably can be manipulated very, very easily because they're conditioned for appeasement. Does that make sense? All right. If you come to counter manipulation out in July, we're going to talk about how predators test social boundaries in safe situations to see who's most likely to accept being pushed around. Very simple things that they'll do, like having a person pick a restaurant and then showing up late and seeing how they respond to it. Innocuous things you wouldn't think a predator would do to size up, your boundary states, right? But that's kind of how they do it. They know how to profile extremely well. And if you don't know how to profile the profilers, you're in trouble. Remember I told you, if I know you better than you know me, I can influence you. If I know you better than you know yourself, I can control you. This is the other side of influence. And this is something not in a negative way. In your manuals, as you're reading your manuals, you're going to see a section in your book called the I3 model. I3 model has 3 components. The first I is identity. Who you are. What are your values? What are your beliefs? What are your strengths? What are your attributes? What are the things that make you more persuasive and more charismatic? What are the things that hold you back from being more persuasive? Are you tall? If you're tall, taller people get more status and authority and attraction generated in people than people who are shorter. Are you overweight, or are you average, or are you skinny? Fat people are never viewed positively, even in this generation. Fat people are always viewed as more lazy, less creative, less intelligent, less everything. Okay? If you're attractive, you're going to get the benefit of the doubt in everything. Attractive people get less jail time. All right?
There's one guy, he was going to jail and they let him out because he got a modeling contract.
Mm-hmm.
Because what?
You got a modeling.
Yeah, because he's so good looking.
Oh.
Juries always assume the more attractive person is innocent unless it's a sex crime, where they use their attraction as a then it tends to flip, the script tends to flip. But that's the only time. They get less jail time, they get raises faster and better. So the ugly truth is attractive people get more stuff. So if you're not doing things to actively enhance your ability to modulate and manage your skills of attraction, you're at a disadvantage. Now, there's more to attraction than just physical appearance, but it's big. It's a big component. Okay? But that's all in the identity model. Who are you? What are your attributes? What's the message you're sending out? People asked about a luminescence. You have 2 types of qualities or attributes that you can work with. You can have passive attractors and active attractors. Passive attractors are things that you just are. You don't have to do anything for them to be active, right? Things like a natural, deep, resonant voice. Very attractive, very authoritative. Women in studies consistently select men with deep, resonant voices for one-night stands. Okay, so if you got that Barry White voice going, you can lead like a rock star, right? Then we get to I2. I2 is all about intelligence. And when I talk about intelligence, I'm not talking about smarts. I'm talking about information. How much information can we acquire about the target, their goals, their objectives, and how can we use that to create a profile and a strategy to get our outcome? That's I2. That's where you're at now when we talk about stuff like this. And then finally, I3, which is the one everybody comes for, and we tend to gloss over this, and that's influence. The tools of influence, which you spent the last 4 days refining. Best army in the world is impotent if it doesn't know where to drop the bombs. Without intelligence, your influence is impotent.
And those 3 eyes are for what? Like what's
Identity, intelligence, influence.
no, but for what exactly? Like what's the concept behind those 3?
The idea is here, there's 3 components to your ability to influence. A, who you are, your strengths, your attributes, your ethics, your morals, your liabilities. Who are you? What do you have? And it takes an inventory of that to know where you need to bolster. Okay? And then there's the ability to gather intelligence, information about your subject, your objective, whatever it is. Okay? And then finally, the tools of influence. And you can learn all the tools of influence. And they have, if you just kitchen sink people, they have a high probability of working, but that's a lot of work. The more intelligence you gather, the less tools you need. Understand? There's no such, in this case, there's really no such thing as too much information, right? But it starts with, and I taught you influence gathering techniques with criteria and values, with the 3 magic questions, right? That's what those are. They're intelligence gathering tools, and they're doing double duty. They're giving you a connection, rapport, while at the same time giving you access to information. Information that you're going to leverage. Using what? Your influence techniques. Right? See how it all fits? Everything. State control is identity. Who are you? Who do you need to be? How do you become that person? Right? What do I know about my target? How do I use it? Does that make sense?
So it's our identity, not their identity.
Exactly. Who they are comes under the intelligence
Yeah.
I too. Okay? So when you see those lines, be very delicate with how you bring those up. More often than not, I don't bring them up. But it lets me know going into the session where I'm probably going to wind up. I'm probably going to wind up in some 0 to 5, either some kind of abuse or perceived abuse. Remember, how a 5-year-old perceives a situation is drastically different from the way the 35-year-old perceives the same situation in retrospect. And it's always the 5-year-old's perspective that we have to fix, or change, or modify. Okay? Some good lines to have. Starting at the ala nasi, the outer labial here, nasolabial group, down through here to about the edge of the mouth. These are called purpose lines. These are lines you want to have. And the deeper they are, the more on track your life is. When you look at people's faces, and you look at the right side and left side, you'll often notice that one side has deeper lines than the other. This tends to give you an indication of which part of their life is more in alignment with who they are and what they want to be, their purpose for being here. If it's on the left side, their personal life is more on track than their public life. If it's their public life, then they may be a rock star on stage and have a shit life at home. Or it's just not satisfying. Doesn't mean it's still bad, it's not right for them. Right? So these are good lines to have. Okay, when Chinese see these, they like it. They think it's a good thing. Right? When you look at people's chins, especially if they're not making an expression, and you see little dimples or indentations, this is someone who's repressed and holding on to a lot of fear. Okay, you'll see this a lot. When people are afraid, you'll see that area dimple automatically. If there's a lot there when they're not making those faces, they've got a lot to get rid of. Okay, so fear, humor's here, grief, sadness, sorrow, joy, skepticism. I call it appeasement. You can call it disempowerment if you want to. Okay. Last thing we're going to look at really, really quick are these lines here. If you see lines under the lips, these are bitterness lines.
What are they?
Bitterness lines. These are people who've gone beyond resentment, and now they're just fed up. They're just fuck you people, right? And this usually arises in situations that their needs, they're consistently meeting other people's needs, their needs are never being met, and there's no sign of it ever changing, and they just become bitter, for lack of a better word. You understand? It's more of a smoldering, ongoing resentment, right? And these are the people that tend to develop cancers. Because a lot of times when you find yourself in a situation that has no sign of changing, and there's no other way out, the body will generate a way out for you. So a lot of cancers arise out of bitterness. Now, it doesn't mean if you have bitterness lines you're going to get cancer. But there's no such thing as an emotionally healthy cancer patient. Right? And it's almost always anger, resentment, bitterness. Which, if you notice where those areas are, they're in the colon and the gut area. So you get a lot of colon cancers, a lot of irritable bowel, IBS, Crohn's disease, all have a very strong emotional base. Okay? So, bitterness, fear, humor, grief, sorrow, sadness, joy, skepticism. I want you to break up into groups of 3. Take turns talking about and reading each other's faces. Now let me give you a few pointers when you're doing a face reading. Be compassionate. Say, oh, look, you're fearful. No. No, that's not what it's about. Right? Remember that one of the challenges, now we're mitigating this process a little bit because we're taking more of a tactical approach to face reading as opposed to the healer's approach to face reading. But when you become a face reader, and face readers, for those of you who are curious, make around $500 a session. $500 to $700. It's not a bad living, right? When you go through the process of reading their face from a counselor's perspective, the way I was taught it, there's a vibrational interaction that takes place that causes people to emote and to process the pent-up emotions marked in the face. And as long as they talk about it and continue to express it, they'll reach a point where they change their perspective on the experience, either through direct reframing or they come up to their own reframe, and those markings will start to go away. It's a you have to hold that space. It's a very, it's more of a confidant kind of an energy that we take as a face reader. Here we're taking a very tactical approach, but many of you have stuff that you're going to be talking about. So if stuff comes up, find a way to process it, reframe it, magic frame it, point to where you feel it, spin it, whatever, but be okay with being in that process because you may trigger. It's especially true for people who come through the face reading with that application. It becomes a faculty. I think I hold the world's record for abreaction. What happened when you were 5? Blah! But people will do that. They will just start to spontaneously emote around you. So unless you're ready for that, you might want to hold back a little bit. Yes, Matthew. Microphone.
This is just a curiosity question because typically I have tons of energy and I feel like super drained, and I don't know if it's from yesterday when he did that spin or just the amount of information, or is that usually a byproduct too of where
it can be?
Because I feel spent.
You're processing the hell out of something, because we ended yesterday with a rather cathartic module, didn't we?
Yeah.
Some of you had some major shifts, right? Right, and that's the point. Yeah, so just relax, drink lots of water, it'll be fine, right? But yeah, you know, our interventions are short, but yeah, they're nuclear, right? It's kind of fun, but if you're not ready for it, like my wife, my poor wife. First time she spun shit, I taught her how to do it, and she was like, oh, it's something David does, and all of a sudden she has this massive abreaction. She's like, she comes storming out of the bathroom. You bastard! Why didn't you tell me that would happen? I said, you've seen it happen 100 times, but I didn't think it would happen to me. You have to tell people. So are you better? She goes, yeah. I said, you got. Anyway, so yeah, so now I have to give the Dr. Don Liu customer service warning. This shit's powerful. And you never know what's coming up. So just go with it. It's just, and again, the whole point to remember is nothing wrong is happening. And that's the big takeaway. No matter what your body does, it's right. Right? And so you just be with that process and let it happen. However long, or some people get exhausted, some people get super energized, some people have grand mal orgasms followed by massive sobbing attacks, followed by more grand mal orgasms. Right? It's just how, everybody processes different, and that's okay. Because the one thing that you don't want is that shit stuck in you. If it's moving through you, it's moving out of you. Which means you're clear. Yes, Brian?
I noticed.
Microphone.
When I first started using that gray room technique a few weeks ago, like I got it on one of your videos online, and things started like bubbling up over the next week or so, like little things.
Yep.
That I would just be doing something, and it occurred to me that that's why that happened, or that's why I would connect dots.
Very common, yeah.
That, and they didn't feel bad. They just, when I recognized it, I felt better actually by getting it out of the way. So, be aware that when you leave here, after doing that stuff, you probably might feel some of those things.
Yeah. Avoid the belief that because the process was done, that you're done. Because that shit goes on long after the process that you used to initiate it is over. I had one guy who went to this massive session, didn't feel anything for 4 days. And then it hit him like a fucking ton of brick. And boom, it just came out of nowhere. Everybody processes different. And however you do it is right. Just own it and allow it to work itself out. Right? I tell people, if you have to lock yourself in a hotel room and sleep for 18 hours, do it. If you need to find a closet somewhere, grab a stack of dishes and just smash dishes for 20 minutes, I don't want to hear any story. Just do it in a way that's safe and preserves your privacy. It doesn't hurt other people. I don't want to read any stories about you on the top of a fucking post office with an M16, goddammit. Just, be responsible in your expressions, right? But give yourself permission to express, because we don't. We don't give ourselves that permission, and that's why we get sick. And it shows up. It shows up. Okay? It shows up in more places in our face, but this is what we show the world. So, all right, so I want you to grab some partners, look at some faces. If stuff comes up, and it may or may not, I don't know, you may just be having fun with it. If stuff comes up, process it out. Help them work through it in some way. Discuss it, reframe it, but be fully present with them, and that's the important piece. Okay? Let's take 30 minutes for this. We'll come back at 11.
30.
Why, you want more?
No, that's good.
And work and read as many people and be read by as many people as you can in 30 minutes.